care for 11 years. We have 3 biological children and 5 adopted children. We have fostered 15 children who have returned home and then reunified with their parents or relatives. I'm going to share with you what it's like to be a foster parent and tell you about one of our experiences of fostering a child who was reunited with his family. Excuse my voice. Later, I'm going to tell you about one of our children who we've adopted through foster care. Please know that for the privacy of our child and of these families, I have changed the names of the stories. As foster parents, we're just waiting for a phone call. Sorry, I have vocal cord problems. When we were first licensed, we were expecting middle-of-the-night emergency phone calls. In reality, most of our calls came during the day, even with advance notice. One of the things you learn very quickly about the information you obtain is they don't know much. They give you as much as they know, and often it's not right. And not because no one wants to get it right, but it's an emergency situation and it's very stressful. The nuts and bolts part of fostering is very easy. You go downstairs, you get some clothes out of storage, you go to the store, you buy diapers, you buy formula, you make up the crib. Those are the easy parts. The hard part of fostering is the uncertainty and the emotional part. We do get attached to the children we care for. The children that come into care need to know that they're loved. It's an important part of caring for the children. People often say, oh, I don't think I could do foster care, I would love them too much. Well, it's true, you do, you love them too much. Personally, it helped that we had biological children first. I knew that if anything had happened to me in my life and my children were removed from my home, I would want whoever was caring for my children to be rooting for me to do what needs to be done to get my children home. I know we've all heard the saying, there but for the grace of God go I. And that was always in my mind as I fostered children. My reunification story began with a phone call about a 9-month-old boy named Caleb. He was in the hospital in Milwaukee with a fractured skull. He was soon to be released from the hospital to a foster home, and they needed a stay-at-home mom who could take care of his medical issues. We said yes to the placement, and I went to Milwaukee expecting to bring him home with me. Instead, we found out that he was suffering from seizures, and they needed to do additional testing and find out some medications for him. So I stayed a while, and then I went back the next day. When I returned the next day to visit him, I met his birth mom, Jenny. She was there visiting. She was very upset that Caleb was going into foster care. She was a bit aggressive with me. She kept asking me where I lived. I was very vague. I told her Kenosha. She asked me again, like, no, where do you live? So I told her I lived in Whitecaps and kind of avoided it. She was like, no, give me your address. And I told her at that point she needed to call the social worker and they would give her the information she should have. Truth be told, she was very intimidating. She was at the hospital the day I brought Caleb home, and I looked over my shoulder the whole way through the parking lot. You just don't know what to expect. In time, we would find that Caleb was injured during a fight between Jenny and her boyfriend Tom. Both were drunk, and during the fight, Jenny picked up Caleb, thinking that Tom would not hit her if she was holding her son. In truth, Tom didn't care. He went to punch Jenny and he hit Caleb instead. And then, because they both knew it was not a good situation, they did not go to the hospital immediately. They waited. When they finally realized that he needed medical attention, the stories at the hospital didn't match up, and that's when crisis was called. It was determined that Jenny's older 2 children could be placed with an aunt, but due to Caleb's injuries and also the pending criminal charges, Caleb needed to be in a foster home. After Caleb came home from the hospital, we had to give him seizure medication twice daily and keep a close eye on him and his injuries. In spite of it all, he was a very happy baby and just a delight to have. It was determined that Jenny could have supervised visitation with Caleb, but it would be over a week before that could be arranged. So I ended up meeting Jenny at the local play McDonald's, and I brought my kids along, and my kids played nearby while I supervised the visit between Jenny and her son. Jenny also called daily, sometimes twice daily, to check on Caleb. It was during these visits and phone calls that our relationship changed, from Jenny being suspicious of me to her seeing me as an advocate for her child's health and for her being reunified with Caleb. Due to the nature of Caleb's injury, we had a lot of doctor's appointments at Children's Hospital in Milwaukee. We had to do brain scans to check for seizure activity and to adjust his medication. Jenny made it to every one of his appointments and was very involved in his medical care. It can be very challenging in those situations as doctors ask a lot of questions about the child's eating and sleeping habits, especially due to his seizures. Mom would try to answer all of those questions, but she only knew about him before his injury. So there's this delicate interaction where you allow Mom to give information and you correct it as needed. It's a very awkward situation. We were told to plan on having Caleb in our home for about 6 months while Jenny did what she needed to have him home. And there were also issues with the safety and the condition of the home. Jenny was determined to have our children home, and she worked very hard to do so. When she found out that she could not be with her boyfriend who injured Caleb, she broke up with him immediately. She doubled up on all of her classes, her parenting classes, her alcohol and drug abuse classes, anger management classes, and passed all of her drug and alcohol tests during the time Caleb was in our care. During this time, we also had twice weekly supervised visits for Caleb. This meant that twice a week I would bring Caleb across town and drop him off and return 2 hours later to pick him up. The hardest part was the after-school visits. It was important for the siblings to see their little brother. And so we would go out at dinner time and then come back at bedtime to bring him home. Soon it was decided that Jenny was very safe and appropriate with Caleb during the visits, and he was allowed to have visits in her home. This meant she could now get my address, come to my house, pick Caleb up and bring him to her home, and then return him home afterwards. That was extremely helpful as we were still going to Milwaukee very often, and our schedule was very full. Due to her hard work and willingness to cooperate with the social worker and the conditions of return, Jenny was reunited with Caleb only 3 months after he had been taken from home. She had worked hard to get her children back, and it's a very successful reunification. Jenny kept in touch with our family for the first few years and actually stopped by a number of times so we could see him and how much he's grown. Jenny has always expressed to us how grateful she was that our family was there for her in her time of need. We were able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and witness to her through Caleb and our care of her and her son. Thank you.